Hey everybody, it's Stuart here from Bits of Chips and welcome back to my journey into profitable poker. So today I'll be continuing where I left off with essential math. Having a good understanding of poker math will provide us with another tool against our opponents, as players at the lower stakes will most likely be not using maths, so therefore giving us a greater advantage against them. So let's take a look at what we've got left. So before we continue, here's a quick recap of what I've covered in the previous video. Bet sizing and thinking in big blinds covered how we should bet on the table. Effective stack sizes showed us the maximum amount that could be won between two players on a single hand. Probability was the effective outcome of any given situation. Equity was the probability percentage of making our draw. Variance was every poker player's nemesis. This is the deviation from the expected outcome. And finally, pot odds. What odds are being offered to call a bet? So with that quick recap, let's continue with our essential maths. Implied odds. Implied odds are another mathematical concept that I need to be aware of, as most opponents at the lower stakes won't. Implied odds are an extension of pot odds. While pot odds are how much you can win immediately, implied odds are how much you can win on later rounds of betting after we make the best hand. Implied odds state that we can call a bet now, even if we are not getting good direct pot odds, if we expect to make it up on later streak of betting if we hit our draw. So implied odds reflect how much we can expect to win on later streaks when we hit our drawing hands. Understanding the difference between good and bad implied odds is important before I try to implement this into my strategy. When you are committing more money to the pot with bad direct pot odds, we are committing more money than we should based on our equity. Our implied odds should make up for this by yielding more to the pot on later streets. So here's a quick look at each aspect of implied odds. Good implied odds. If we expect to win a lot more money on later streets from our opponents. Bad implied odds. If we expect to win little or no money from our opponents on later streets. When implied odds work well. Against aggressive opponents, we can call flop and turn bets with bad direct pot odds, as we expect our aggressive opponent to pay us off when we hit our draws. Loose passive players are a great opponent to get paid off on later streets when we make the best hand, as they hate to fold post-flop and will call down even with bottom pair. Being last to act means you are in the best position, as you can see everyone's act prior to your action. Being in multi-way pots can give you a very good implied odds if you hit a monster hand, simply because the more people in the pot, the bigger it can get. When implied odds don't work well against tight aggressive opponents, they shut down at any sight of draws, so they tend not to pay you off, as they fold too often. Implied odds relies on extracting money on future streets, not the street we are currently on. Relying on implied odds in this situation is bad, as short stackers are most likely to shove if raised. End of action is when there is an all-in situation or on the river and there is no more streets to bet on. Being out of position doesn't mean you won't be able to struck money at your opponents, it's just not ideal. Having to rely on your opponent to bet after you check, they can easily just check you back. Obvious straight and flush draws have bad implied odds, as even the poorest of players can spot them. The rule of 2 and 4. This is a very easy and widely used way of estimating our equity when we're playing a hand, without any complicated math or equity calculators. We use the rule of 2 and 4 in 2 simple steps. 1. Count the number of outs you have to make your hand. Step 2. Multiply our outs based on the criteria below. A. Multiply our outs by 2 when we're on the flop and not facing an all-in call. B. Multiply our outs by 4 when we're on the flop and facing an all-in call. C. Multiply our outs on the turn irrelevant of the situation. This rule will allow us to calculate our equity in the hand very quickly. Although it's not 100% guaranteed, most situations it's not going to be anything more than 2 to 3% different. Expected value. Expected value, commonly referred to in the poker world as EV, is another very important mathematical concept that I need to understand. EV is how much we expect to win or lose on average over the long run based upon a specific scenario in poker. Every situation and action in poker has an expected value associated with it. Certain situations will be profitable EV, while others will be unprofitable, which is negative EV. With EV, we are concerned how well a certain play will do over the long run, and not the outcome of a single hand. For example, if we evaluated a pre-flop all-in call with aces against a player who had jacks or queens, irrelevant or whether we won the hand or not, we know in the long run it's a profitable move. Now that we understand what expected value or EV is, we can begin to determine whether we should call or fold any hand by applying these 3 steps. Our first step is to determine the pot odds we are being offered using the method we learned in the previous video. We will also need to determine whether we have any implied odds for the hand. Here's a quick recap for good implied odds. Against aggressive opponents, against calling stations, when you're in position, in multi-way pots, or with hidden draws. Step 2. Once we have determined our pot and implied odds, next we need to determine our hand equity based upon our draws using the rule of 2 and 4. Step 3. After determining our pot odds, implied odds, and hand equity, we must now determine whether there's a plus EV or negative EV. We can do this by comparing pot odds against hand equity. Being able to compare our pot odds against our hand equity quickly is imperative in making plus EV decisions. There are 2 ways of doing this, the ratio method and the percentage method. I'm going to concentrate on the percentage method as this is the method I'm going to be using throughout my journey. Although with either method our goal is to call when our hand equity is greater than the pot odds being presented to us. So here is 2 formulas. To call, we need to have a higher percentage equity than the pot odds being offered. And if the percentage equity is lower than the percentage pot odds being offered, we fold. Here's a quick example of that. To call, our percentage equity is 33% and our pot odds is 25%. And if our percentage equity is 16.7% against the pot odds of 33%, we should fold. As I mentioned earlier, we also have to take into consideration implied odds when making a call. So even though our calculations may show we should fold, if we think we can improve on later streets due to implied odds, we can make a call. So that's it for essential math for now. I now have a good understanding and sufficient information to be able to apply it into my strategy. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope you join me on the next one. And as always, if you want to find me, you can catch me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can just comment on the video below. And if you haven't already done so, please press the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.